Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I am one of the last speakers. After me is Jeopardy, and then closing ceremonies, and then lightning talks. Yes, okay. You been having a good FreakNIC? Yep. Yes. Yay! I'm winding down. Okay, good. All right, so Kryptos. This is an exciting topic right now because it is currently on auction. The fourth unsolved part is on an online auction which started a few weeks ago and wraps up on November 20th. So every single day I'm watching the counter tick up. We'll see what it is when I get to that part of the talk. All right, so this is a sculpture at CIA. Sound okay? Yeah, okay. This was installed a few decades ago. The CIA, on the right, we have the original headquarters building, and when they wanted their new headquarters building on the left, they were sort of required to have some art to go around the building, and one of the things that they requested, they formed a committee that formed a committee that formed a committee, and I'm not making that up. They decided to ask Jim Sanborn, who'd already been doing art around the Washington, D.C. area, and he decided, after doing some more research, to do a sculpture that had this theme of things that are hidden. So he called it Kryptos, which is Greek for the word hidden. I got a chance to see it. These are rubbings that I did of it. Each one is on a piece of paper, a standard 8.5 by 11. Sort of gives you an idea of the size of the sculpture. It has about 2,000 characters that are carved through it. And this is the dedication in 1988, and there is Jim Sanborn handing an envelope to the director of the CIA at the time, William Webster. We think we know what is in the envelope, but we're not sure. It might have been the answer to Kryptos, it might not, but he put something in that envelope and it was sealed, and he asked William Webster at the time, can you keep a secret? And William Webster said, my lips are sealed, as is the envelope. So Jim Sanborn, born in 1945, Washington, D.C., studied at Oxford, has done a ton of travel, and has a degree in social anthropology, for what that's worth, and a master's degree in sculpture. And I started making a list of all of his works. So this, I'll tell you a little bit of the story. I was at a convention in Atlanta called DragonCon. Anybody here been to DragonCon? A couple people. So it's a big fan convention, brings in, 60,000 people, takes over downtown Atlanta. And I had been asked to speak at the convention on my job at the time, which was making computer games. And I was speaking in the Electronic Frontiers track. And at the end of the day, you get together with the other speakers, and some of the speakers at the time were people from Nashville who had been involved with creating this convention called FreakNIC, FreakNIC 3 at the time. And at the end of the day, you get together, you have a drink, and they told me about this code that had been released at FreakNIC 3, and no one had cracked it yet. So they were handing out code on a sheet of paper saying, if you can solve this challenge, you get a free trip to a HackerCon, free drinks, free t-shirts, all that. So I picked it up with all the stuff you get. This was in, 23 years ago, so late 90s. And I took a look at it, and I was home one weekend. I was kind of frustrated because I wanted to go to DEF CON, but I couldn't because I was sick with the flu at the time. And I took a look at the code, and I got obsessed with cracking this code. And my friends, sometimes they send me a text message saying, hey, do you want to go out to a movie? I'm like, don't talk to me unless you want to talk about the code. And it took me 10 days, but I cracked it, and felt like longer, but I cracked it. And then I went around cracking a bunch of other codes in the hacker scene. So many that I've actually been banned from competition. Like when the AtlantaCon, they had their code was on a sheet of paper, and at the bottom of the paper it said, past puzzle solvers are ineligible with solving the Atlanticon puzzle. Give someone else a chance, Elonka. So I cracked that one too. And then September 11th happened, and I was as enraged as everyone else. And I called up the local FBI and I said, hey, can I help with the war on terrorism? And they said no. And I kept calling them up, and eventually they asked me, well, what is it that you know about? And I said, well, I've been cracking all these codes in the hacker scene, and I know about binary and PGP and encoding and steganography and all this stuff. And one of them said, steganography. We've been hearing rumors that Al-Qaeda was using steganography as a way of planning the September 11th attacks. And we know that there's big brains in Washington, D.C. that know about this stuff, but we're here in St. Louis, which is where I lived at the time. And cryptography isn't really our mission. Maybe you could come in and put together a talk about steganography. And I said, great. And I think they thought that I was going to come in and give a little 3 to 5 minute talk about steganography. But no, I put together a 70-slide PowerPoint presentation about what kind of codes that Al-Qaeda was using and what they weren't using. And that talk became very popular. So now we take a quick step to another project of mine, which is after September 11th, I have a cousin who works in DC, and he had a very close call that morning on September 11th. He was on his way to give a talk in the Pentagon, and he was running late because he was having printer problems. Give me a minute. Because he was having printer problems, and on his way to the Pentagon, he was checking his phone, and his phone actually crashed from all of the messages from people that were saying, a plane just hit the Pentagon, don't go. So the plane hit right where he was going to be. And some of the people that he was supposed to brief were killed. And so after all of this, I went out to DC, my first time in DC, and to hug my cousin. And then we went to the memorial at the Pentagon, and we could still smell the smoke. And we put a little American flag out there. And then we were driving around, and my cousin was saying, hey, is there anything else you'd like to see? This is your first time in Washington, D.C. And I said, well, no, you, really. And he said, well, thanks, that's nice. I like seeing you too. But really, there's kind of a lot of stuff here to see. And I said, I've heard about this sculpture at CIA headquarters called Kryptos with a code on it. Let's go see that. And he said, okay, that's in Langley. And we needed to find it, and CIA it doesn't have a street address. You can't just, pump it in and ask the MapQuest or something. So we found it by looking at overhead views from Tom Clancy movies and stuff. And then we drove over, and we weren't thinking really clearly at the time. We thought we were going to just kind of take an off-ramp and then drive around the service road and look for the wall and peek over the wall and see Kryptos. It didn't work like that because there's no service road around the CIA. And you take the exit and you're there, and it's a big gate, and it's got barbed wire and a guard shack with a lot of big guys with guns who were pouring out and asking you right after September 11th, very understandable questions. Who are you and why are you here? And we're like, oh, we're here to see Kryptos. And they kind of relaxed a little and said, no, sorry, you only get in with official business only. And and then my cousin and I, we kind of looked at each other like, can we talk our way into CIA? And we're saying, well, can we get an invitation from our congressperson? And they said, no, official business only. And we're like, well, is there like a family day? Could we get in that way? And the guards are saying, no, official business only. And like I said, these are big guys with guns. And eventually my cousin and I, we drove away. And I'm sort of thinking about this official business. And then we come back over to me talking to the St. Louis FBI. And I was thinking maybe I could use that as the official business that's eventually going to get me into CIA headquarters. And so I put a picture of Kryptos into one of my slides, and every time I gave the talk, I would say, boy, I'd love to give this talk at CIA someday. I'd love to give this talk at CIA someday. And at one point, I was giving a talk at DEF CON. This is when it was at the Alexis Park Hotel in Las Vegas. And I was like, we were in the roof, a big roof tent. And I was like, boy, I'd love to give this talk at CIA someday. And after the talk, people come up and they give you business cards and things. And one of them leaned across the desk and looked at me in the eye and said, I work at Langley. I think I can get you in. So I'm like, cool, this is great. We have a CIA analyst that just blew their cover at DEF CON. And we kind of exchanged phone numbers. They only gave me a first name. And afterwards they said, okay, well, can you send me your slides and we'll see about getting you in. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And with the condition that I can get to see Kryptos once I'm over there. And they're back and forth. And I said, but can you prove to me that you really work at CIA and you're not just a hacker who's pulling my chain and saying that you work at CIA, but you don't really work at CIA? And they said, well, how am I supposed to do that? I said, well, send me an email from an official CIA email address. And they said, well, I don't have an email from an official CIA address. And I said, well, get an email from an official CIA address. And some time goes by, and I get an email from at ucia.gov, which is unclassified CIA.gov. And I wrote back to them, and then they wrote back to me, so I'm making sure we're getting back and forth communication. It's not a spoofed email address. And they invited me out, and I got to see Kryptos up close, and I got to do the rubbings, as you saw in one of my slides there. So that was kind of cool, kind of achievement unlocked. I got to see Kryptos. Okay, and I did the rubbings, and I brought the rubbings back home to St. Louis, and I made a little web page, Elonka's Visit to CIA. Okay, and I figured I was done at that point. I'd gotten to see Kryptos, and I had the rubbings, I had the proof, I wrote it up, and I thought I was done. Well, I wasn't done. That web page kind of changed my life, because all of a sudden people started writing to me from all over the world, asking me questions about Kryptos. And have you seen this? Did you do that? And I'm a helpful person, so I was trying to answer their questions. But it just kept going and going. I had an FAQ, and the questions just kept going and going. Yeah, that webpage just went out of control with people writing to me. And then I had the artist, Jim Sanborn, wrote to me and said, who are you and why do you have a webpage about me? Because he sort of thought I was sort of stalking him. And I thought, no, I'm fine, I like your work. And so we got kind of into a friendly conversation, and I explained that I was a fan. And then I really started getting more interested in Kryptos, working on it and working on different methods and finding out what had happened, which is that there are 4 codes on it. 3 of the 4 have been solved, 4th not solved, considered one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. And the first person to publicly solve it was this guy, Jim Sanborn, in 1999. He's a California computer scientist. And then the CIA came forward and said, well, we've got a guy who solved it last year, 1998, one of our analysts who did it on his own time, David Stein. And he wrote up kind of a little report, and it was circulated around CIA, and that was as far as it went. And then at the time, NSA came forward and said, well, we've got a team that's done it too, but we're not going to tell you who, and we're not going to tell you when, which is very NSA. The joke around DC is that it stands for no such agency. So since then, I've asked more and I found others. So I know that they put together a team. I know that 2 of them at least were Ken Miller and Denny McDaniels, and that they had done something in 1992, and they wrote a report, and it was sent from NSA to CIA, and that was it. So let's go forward. I'll tell you a little bit more. So what is on Kryptos? Well, it's got the 4 plates. 2 of these plates are what's called a visionaire table. It's hundreds of years old, a type of system. And if you look at it, you can see these lovely diagonals in it because each keyed alphabet is shifted over by 1. And so that's a whole half of Kryptos. And then you go to the part that has the ciphertext, and this what's called K1 now, part 1, and it starts with EMUFP, EMUFP. And so you take that ciphertext, those 2 lines, and you apply visionaire cipher system with 2 keywords. The keywords are Kryptos and palimpsest. Palimpsest is a word for a scroll that's had stuff scraped off of it and then another message written on. So you've got bits of the old message that are showing through. And if you use those 2 keywords, you get the answer, the plain text answer, between subtle shading and the absence of light lies the nuance of illusion. So you say, you just got to type on her slide. No, that's what the plain text comes out to be, which is occlusion. And I asked Sanborn why there's a Q there, occlusions instead of illusion. And I said, was that a typo on the sculpture? And he said, no, it was deliberate. But it's not what it was that's so important. It's the orientation or the positioning. Don't know what that means. So let's go on to part 2. That starts at line 3 and goes to the bottom of the top plate there. Here's the ciphertext of it. There was a mistake in this one at the very bottom line of that ciphertext. So I'll go on here. So this is also visionaire with the 2 keywords Kryptos and abscissa. Abscissa is the word for an x coordinate on a graph. And the plain text of this one says, it was totally invisible. How's that possible? They used the Earth's magnetic field, X. The information was gathered and transmitted underground to an unknown location, X. Does Langley know about this? They should. It's buried out there somewhere, X. Who knows the exact location? Only WW. This was his last message, X. 38 degrees, 57 minutes, 6.5 seconds north, 77 degrees, 8 minutes, 44 seconds west. And then we thought after that it said ID by Rose, but when Sanborn said that there had been a mistake and it was corrected, what it actually says is X layer 2. Then there's part 3, starts at the top of the bottom plate and goes all the way down to the 4th line from the bottom. And that one it's a different system. It's not a substitution system like Visionaire, it's a transposition system. So if you look at it, you'll see lots of E's and T's and A's and O's. So all the letters are there, they're just scrambled in a particular way. And the plain text for part 3, when you unscramble it, says, slowly, desperately slowly, the remains of passage debris that encumbered the lower part of the doorway was removed. With trembling hands, I made a tiny breach in the upper left-hand corner, and then, widening the hole a little, I inserted the candle and peered in. The hot air escaping from the chamber caused the flame to flicker, but presently details of the room within emerged from the mist. X. Can you see anything? Q. Anybody want to guess what that is?
I know what it is.
This is a paraphrased extract from the diary of the archaeologist Howard Carter on November 26, 1922, the day that he discovered King Tut's tomb. So, a few other interesting things about part 3 is some of the letters are a little out of alignment in that top corner. There's 5 letters, the D, Y, A, H, R, and this is a rubbing that I did. We don't know exactly what it means. Sanborn has said that it's important, but we don't know much beyond that. And then there's part 4 at the bottom 4 lines there. One of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. And Sanborn has given clues about part 4 over the years. For example, in 2010, he told us that the word Berlin is at that particular location in the plaintext. And he's told us that the word clock appears immediately after it, Berlin clock. Also in January 2020, he's told us that the word northeast appears there. And then the pandemic started and he kind of wanted to mix things up a little bit. And so he told us that the word east appears just before northeast there. And he told one person in an email and was waiting to see how long it was going to percolate into the community. And it took a few months. And then we got it. I called him, Jim, did you just release another clue? He said, yeah. So we have east, northeast, and Berlin clock. So the Berlin clocks, Berlin has a lot of clocks. And we've asked Sanborn about those clocks a lot. Which clock? Does he have a favorite clock? And he says he likes both of them. So we're like, okay, what are the 2 most famous Berlin clocks? And we pointed out one clock that has sort of like a binary or a base 5 system. And he says, yes, you should pay attention to that clock. But finally, just last week at a press event at the Spy Museum, he announced another clue, and that clue was that there's only one clock we need to pay attention to. And this is I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but it's in a major plaza in Berlin. And it goes in a circle, and it shows all the different time zones. And it was something that made a big impression on Sanborn when he was visiting Berlin in the late 1980s, because that was right around the same time that the Berlin Wall fell. And so people gathered near that clock and were protesting, and the wall fell not soon after that. So another thing that I found doing my research is there was a sculpture of his that was just called the Untitled Kryptos piece. And he sold it to a private collector. And I tracked down a private collector, and it's one of the .com guys in Los Angeles. And I called up this guy and I said, hi, I'm Elonka. I tried to make myself sound super important. And I said, can I come into your backyard and see this sculpture that you purchased? And he said, yeah, sure, come on over. And I found out that Sanborn had also made another version of that was a little bigger, about 20% larger, which he'd given to a museum. But at the .com guy's backyard, this is it when I took pictures when I was there. And it has 2 sides. And on one side it has all the text of Kryptos, but in a different order. And on the other side it has Russian text, Cyrillic text, which also appears on another sculpture of his, which is called Cyrillic Projector. And we have cracked the puzzles on both sides, and that's a whole nother long talk. So I'm kind of skipping over this so we can get to Jeopardy. So the Untitled Kryptos piece, as I said, there's a version outside a museum, which is the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. And it has exactly the same text as is on the sculpture at the .com guy's backyard. It's just slightly different size. And what I discovered when I was visiting is that there is a difference in the text, which is that there are 2 dots that appear on that sculpture, but they don't appear on the Kryptos sculpture. Let me see if I got it. Yeah, these 2 dots, S dot, F dot. So on the Kryptos sculpture, it says the exact same cipher text, which is, you have the Z, B, S, F, D, but no dots. And we're not sure what that means. If they were to appear on Kryptos, they would be, let me get my mouse going here. Come on, back here. Can you see my mouse? And, okay, and you
Yeah.
can see the red circle.
Yep.
Interesting. It's not showing here. That's where the dots would be if they were on the Kryptos sculpture. So, also, here's another one, the latitude and longitude, the 38 degrees, 57 minutes, 6.5 seconds north. Those point not to Kryptos, but to an area about 150 feet southeast of Kryptos that's still within that yard. So again, I'm trying to use my mouse here. This white building with the funny shaped roof, that is the cafeteria. There is a line of windows on the left side of the cafeteria looking out into this landscaped area.
You don't have your mouse on screen.
You don't? Okay, I'll just talk. Okay, white building, weird looking roof, cafeteria. And to the left of that is the landscaped area that Sanborn designed. And the new headquarters building, which is the building with the much more interesting looking roof, is to the left of that. And then there is a pathway leading into the new headquarters building. And Sanborn has designed some pieces that are on both sides of that pathway. Okay, now we're going to try again. Mouse, there we go. So cafeteria. Sanborn designed this entire courtyard and some other pieces over here. Kryptos itself is about here, and the longitude and latitude point right around where my mouse is pointing to right now. These large stone slabs are tilted up out of the ground. So Sanborn was trying to replicate geologic forces that are bringing something out of the ground that way. And you have large slabs of granite, and then in between the slabs of granite, you've got these metal sheets that have Morse code written on them. And the Morse code says things like SOS, shadow forces, lucid memory, T is your position, digital interpretatu. And the reason the letters are a little cut there is because the Morse code goes right up between. So instead of T is your position, the intent was to say what is your position, and digital interpretation. There's probably other words. I've asked Sanborn if the Morse code goes all the way through, and he has said yes. We have no idea what it says. We do know that after each day that he was working, the CIA would send people out to scan everything that he'd done to make sure he wasn't embedding bugs or anything like that in his work. Here are some other pieces. We have a compass rose where the needle is not pointing north, and there is a large stone that is a lodestone. So here, the lodestone. So here we have these three are all of the same piece at the bottom. So we have the compass rose, which is pointing towards the lodestone. And here's another angle of it, the lodestone and some Morse code. And here's another angle where you see the slabs are tilted up and the lodestone is right there. And then there's also another piece that has no Morse code, no lodestone. It's just kind of there, which is odd and may be related to other of his work there, we're not sure. And then there's the alignment. Many places when you see Kryptos, you'll see the picture on the left. And Sanborn was very direct with me. He says, don't show that, that's the wrong side. That's the ugly side. Okay, how should we do it? And it's the one on the right. He says, yes, that one, that's the front of Kryptos. So take that for what it's worth. Let's see. And then we have, as I said, part 4. We don't know what it says. Famous unsolved code, 97 characters there. Now, how did Sanborn learn about codes? Well, he was paired by William Webster, the director at the time, with this man named Ed Scheidt, who was chairman of a CIA cryptographic center. And he loved codes. He'd have like ties with hieroglyphics on them. And he taught Jim Sanborn about codes over a period of a few months. And then Sanborn took that knowledge and encrypted the codes that he put onto Kryptos. So I have met Scheit a few times and pumped him for information, get him to go to sushi, buy him drinks, anything I can do to get information out of him, okay? And he said things like he did things to mask the English in part 4. And he says that the first 3 parts, we solved it and we had the benefits of the English language. Okay, and it's like you can look for most frequent letters and things like that. But he says that part 4, you cannot do that. You cannot solve it by weighting the English language. And he also said we solved the first 3 parts without recovering the keys first. So we're not entirely sure what that means either. We know that he's implied and he said that creating a code, sometimes you leave it out there and it's going to be there for several years, and there may be a key for it, but whoever has come in to solve it, they may have forgotten that key. So there needs to be some sort of a clue around there as to what the key was or what the key is. So the first part, K1, we know that the keys were Kryptos and palimpsest, and then we had Kryptos and abscissa. So we've put a lot of energy into thinking what could clue us to the word of abscissa, what could clue us to the word of palimpsest. And we have lots of guesses, but we're really not sure. Scheit has also said he used a little bit of stego. Steganography is a way of hiding a message in a way that it's not entirely clear that there was a message. So we've the oldest example of steganography goes back to the Greek historian Herodotus, who talked about a king that wanted to get a message across enemy lines. He knew that any message he sent, any messenger he sent would be searched, and if a message was found, the messenger would probably be killed, which is a downside, but a bigger deal is that the message is not getting where it needs to go. So what happened then is the king took a messenger and he shaved the guy's head, tattooed a message onto the scalp, waited for the hair to grow back, and then sent the messenger across enemy lines. Messenger searched, no message is found. He gets to his destination, shaves his head, points it at the recipient. So this is not a system that can be used for rapid messages, but it is a way of hiding a message. Right? So what did Ed mean when he said a little bit of stego? We're not sure. But he has said that the last part is English and it uses all the letters. It's not a case where it just uses like the first 20 letters or something like that. So we know it's 97 letters. So Sanborn has been talking a lot about Kryptos over the last few weeks because of the auction that's going on. And in an interview with Financial Times was asking him, saying, is there really an answer there? And Sanborn has said, yes, there's really an answer. And yes, he was given a real system by Scheit, but he said he took Scheit's system and then, pardon my language, he fucked with it. We don't know what that means. The reporter was asking what it means. I mean, we do know that this K4 has been unsolved for 35 years now. And a lot of really smart people have been working on it, but without success. So what the heck did Sanborn do? We know that he took a real system and then he messed with it. So maybe it's not ever going to be solved by a college-educated cryptologist. Maybe it's going to be someone who comes out of left field and has some idea about light and how an artist might mess with the system. You fold the paper into origami and hold it. I don't know, but Sanborn did something weird to it. So another piece of information, the NSA, which is our government agency that's one of their missions is solving code, so a lot of very smart people. In 1992, the CIA's deputy director, Admiral Studman, said to the NSA, he'd worked at the NSA before, now he's at the CIA. So he said to the NSA, okay, you guys are so hot, let's see how hot you are. And the Vice Admiral Mike McConnell, who was at the NSA at the time, took up the challenge, and they put together a team. They put together a team with 4 people, and they had the strength of the NSA's computers, and they ran computer attacks on the whole thing. And they did solve parts 1 through 3 by December 1992, but could not solve that 4th part. And then they wrote up what they did, and they sent it on to CIA, and they're done with it. And my group is very, very interested in seeing those notes by the NSA. And we've gone to the NSA and said, can we see this report? And the NSA comes back and says, no. And we say, well, why not? And they say, well, it's classified. And we come back and say, this is a recreational cipher that has nothing to do with national security. Why is it classified? And they just, we can't tell you it's classified. So kept on pushing, kept requesting, and I put together a formal FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, and sent it on to the NSA. And I won't go through all the details, but this was a multi-year process where I sent something in, and then they came back and said classified, and I said, I still want to see it. And they said, are you willing to pay for copying expenses? And I said, yeah, sure. And they said, okay, you're first in line. I'm like, great. And then another 2 years later, I get, okay, you're first in line. And I'm like, whatever, I have friends who worked in DC, and they said, Elonka, this is the NSA's way of saying, go away. In fact, I kept pushing on it, and finally, in May 2013, I got a big, thick envelope that came in the mail, which is all this stuff, and at the top it said, please forward to Admiral Studman for review, and it had a whole bunch of stuff redacted on it, but it was the report. And at the bottom, this is all now on the web now, you can say approved for release by NSA on May 21st, 2013, FOIA case number 61191, that's me. Okay. So, why hasn't K4 been solved yet? Well, it's very short. It's just 97 characters, and when you're working on a code, you generally want a large amount of ciphertext so you can run mathematical attacks on it. Maybe we have missed something. Maybe we've been misdirected, like maybe when he says that Berlin clock is at a certain, maybe it doesn't say Berlin clock at that position, or maybe it says Argentina, we don't know. There may be a necessary key that is only accessible on K4 grounds, that you have to find something in the CIA museum, and maybe he just messed it up. Maybe there is some sort of mistake. So time goes by, and Jim he gets email about this all the time, and he finally said he's tired of it, and his health is not the greatest, and he was convinced by an auction house to put that last part up for auction, which he did. And there is an online auction that is going on right now. Bids are coming in, I check it every day, and the auction will end on November 20th. And this is what the auction list was when they first started it, and this has changed several times, but the basic part of it was the papers that are going out with the auction, and how there's going to be a big proof of concept piece. And I noticed in here where it said, the bid, they're guesstimating it's going to go for the same price as what an Enigma machine would go for. And I noticed this part where they said, copies of coding charts, originals at Smithsonian. What's this, originals at Smithsonian? Okay. Yeah, and because I'd looked at the Smithsonian before, like 20 years ago, and they didn't have anything, and now it's saying, originals at Smithsonian. And a couple guys decided to go make the trip to the Smithsonian. And this is the page from the Archives of American Art, and it shows the Jim Sanborn papers. And they wanted, because they listed Jim as one of the important American artists, because he'd done a lot of art in many different locations. And so they wanted everything of his going back to when he was a child, literally a child making doodles. And so they've got many boxes of Jim Sanborn stuff. And if you go in and you look at different box numbers, and this is what's in box 6, and it talks about different sculptures that he made and coding charts. And a couple guys went in, a guy in California asked a friend of his in DC to go through and look through these boxes and take pictures. And the guy took pictures of a lot of things. And the guy in California was looking through it, and he found one of the pages had a bunch of little pieces that were all taped to it. And one of those little pieces said Berlin clock. And he found other things in the Northeast, and he put it all together. He said, this is the answer to K4. Oh my God. So they sent an email to Jim Sanborn and said, we think we have the answer to K4 from the Smithsonian. And Jim got really angry. He felt like they'd stolen it, because the auction's going on, and this is probably going to affect the auction. And he told the auction house, and the auction house contacted these guys and threatened them with legal action, saying if they release this answer, it could potentially lower the price that they'd get in the auction. And so there's a financial difference there. And the guys weren't really happy about that, so they went to the New York Times about it. And the New York Times published this thing about a CIA secret, and they didn't publish the answer to K4 here, but the auction house wanted the guys to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, with the understanding that they might get a percentage of what comes in from the auction if they're able to keep their mouths shut. And the guys were, for whatever reason, were kind of offended by that. So there's a lot of back and forth that was going on and is going on, but that's kind of where it's at, like right now. So this is from a press event that Sanborn did at the International Spy Museum 4 days ago, I think. This is live stuff going on. And this is the bid as it was about an hour ago. So it's now at $244,000 for the answer to Kryptos. With the next bid, it always has to go up 10%. Now, the RR auction, the auction house, they don't do it like eBay, where you have to be there in like the last minute when it goes live and kind of really just jam the button to see if you can get your bid in. They do it with a 30-minute system, so that anybody who makes a bid, everyone else has at least 30 minutes in order to place another bid. So that process is that 30-minute process is gonna start on the 20th, which is a few days from now. So I am extremely interested. I don't know. I know I placed a bid. I was bidder number 3, a paltry $12,100. Right now you can see I'm beat by at least an order of magnitude going in there. This is more than my retirement account is going.
Bastards.
So I'm just kind of watching it. Now, I do know a few wealthy people, .com millionaires. So I kind of know some of these people that are bidding. Some I don't know. There may be some Saudi prince that just really wants to know what crypto says, and then they'll put in their bid and find out, and then they'll be not interested in it. What Jim wants is for whoever wins to then be what he calls the keeper of it, so that he doesn't keep getting emails all the time. This other person, the keeper, will then get these emails all the time. I have volunteered to be this person, so
they're paying for pain.
They're paying for pain. Paying for pain. Yep, that's what it is. So Kind of I'm summarizing here, Kryptos was created around the CIA, dedicated. The first three parts were solved independently by various groups. K4 is still unsolved after 35 years. Sanborn is sick of it. He wants to be done. He's going to be turning 80 years old. He has said that the money that comes in is going to be partially given to charity and partially he's putting it into a fund for his own medical expenses. Starving artists tend not to have retirement accounts, so part of that money is going to go into a fund of his own, and it will all wrap up on the 20th. Now, about this time I would say, hey, I'm selling a book, but we're sold out of books, sorry. But I do have book plates, so anybody that wants an autographed book plate, these are free. These were designed by my co-author and I, Klaus and I, and there's 2 puzzles hidden on the book plates. And that's it. Woo. Okay, questions. Yes.
Okay, so K1, K2, K3, is it visually obvious that these are separate objects? Or if you just walked up to this thing, would you assume this is one giant continuous ciphertext?
Okay, so question was, is it obvious walking up to it that there are 4 codes?
Yeah.
No. Half of the sculpture is a visionary tableau. The other half, there's 2 plates, and within those 2 plates, you've got 4 codes. So it's sort of obvious that one plate could be something and one plate could be something else. K1 and K2 are on the top plate. K3 starts at the top of the bottom plate, goes all the way down to 4 rows from the bottom. K4 starts there and finishes out that plate. Also, the untitled Kryptos piece, it's sort of the same, but there it starts with 3, K3, and it goes K3, K4, K1, K2, K3, K4, and then it like stops halfway through. One of them, they just kind of went through letters and stopped. Right? Okay. In the back, right there. Yep, you.
So can you go back to the page where it had the underlying Berlin clock?
Go back to a page where it has what?
The bits of K4?
You showed the actual code. It had words underneath like Berlin clock and other what you
All his clues.
Okay, with the clues, Okay, let's see if I can get there. No.
Further.
Okay, here's K4, but you want the part with the clues? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a lot of hidden slides.
I don't think I'm correct, but
This one? Okay. Okay.
did it go off the string? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Second off, okay, so I noticed that, I could completely, just like wrong here, but I noticed, I noticed that the 2 A's there, the the second A is a K, and the first A is an L. So like, and K goes, is right before L. So what if, okay, the next time, okay. Yeah, okay, I don't.
That's
Go to the mailing list.
That's an help
Go to the mailing list.
Look at QQ.
Never mind.
Okay. Yeah, Elonka.com/Kryptos. Okay. All right. Yes, with the hat.
So does the auction include like the plain text and the encryption method, or is there a chance you get the solution but still not know how he did it?
That's a great question, because I've often said, like, these 2 guys that have the answer, they have the answer, but they don't have the method. And until we know how you go from the ciphertext to the plain text, I don't think it's solved. So with the auction, they have promised that you get not only the stuff, but you also get an afternoon with Sanborn, where he's going to talk through exactly how everything goes together. So it's my big hope that whoever buys it will have enough in the way of crypto chops to understand what he's saying. If not, I'm willing to volunteer a few people that maybe should be there with him as the answer is being described. All right? Yeah.
So do you think that the discovery of the answer being in the Smithsonian files was what prompted him to reveal Crypto 5?
That's a great question. Do I think that the discovery of K4 and the Smithsonian files has prompted Sanborn to announce more stuff about K5? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Now, he'd always hinted that even after K4 was solved, there would be some sort of further mystery to go along with it, because he has said that as an artist, and he taught art for a while, that as an artist, one of your goals is to keep the attention of the viewer for as long as you can. And a piece of art that keeps someone's attention for 10 minutes is a great thing. And here he has something that's kept attention for 35 years, which he thinks is fantastic. But at the same time, he's a little embarrassed by it, because artists, they tend to have the two halves of their work. They have, part of their work is the kind that you have in galleries, where people show up and they drink wine and eat cheese and look around at what's in the gallery. And then you have the public work, which is the big pieces in the middle of a traffic circle, right? And that's how most artists make their money, is from the public work, but they get their status from the private work. And here, Kryptos is a public piece, and it's the one that he's most well known for, which it kind of sticks in his craw. So, yeah, so that, all right. Yes?
Have you, I know you mentioned that, like, when you, in your private conversations, you said, like, the Q pointed at something, like, from Kryptos, I think it was 1, there was the Q, the illusion.
Yeah.
There was the Q. So you mentioned it, you said it pointed at something. And then you also mentioned that there was the extra dots when you saw Untitled. And I was just wondering, like, have you personally spent any time looking at where Q could be pointing at, or any other, like, trajectories? I'm sure it's maybe on your website. I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Okay, so let me try and repeat that.
Yeah.
So in K1, between subtle shading and the absence of illusion, where illusion is misspelled with a Q, has anyone played with that? So to have a Q in that location, the ciphertext letter is a K. And then in the later part, where it says the information was gathered and transmitted underground, where underground is misspelled with 2 U's, to get a U to appear in that location means that the ciphertext has an R. So here we have KR on the sculpture Kryptos. We don't know. Maybe there's more to find there. Maybe that's just coincidence. We don't know.
And
Okay.
I guess the second part of that was, have you, like, visually looked at the direction that those, like, the R and the K are pointing at?
Have we looked at the direction that what?
Because you mentioned a quote where you said, Sanborn said, Q is pointing at something.
Oh,
So
and
have
it's,
you looked at the visual location of where those things are pointing at?
okay, because it's not what they are, it's the orientation or the positioning.
Yeah.
We've tried, several people have tried to make 3D models of the sculpture and look at it at different times of day and in different seasons, and we don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there anything, or I guess, do you think it's going to be successful that whoever buys it will be the keeper of the questions?
Do I think that whoever buys it will be interested in being the keeper of it? Maybe. I know, personally, I know 2 very wealthy people, .com millionaires, who are bidding on it, and I know one of them would be interested in being the keeper. The other one, you know, not so interested. And I've told the other one saying, you know, I'll happily pay me and I'll happily be the keeper from there. It is an interesting thing that if I got that job and then I would know what the answer is, what should I do in terms of my website and all the things that I'm doing as the moderator? Well, I would go to the other two co-moderators and tell them, and we'd have a discussion about should I continue moderating the list or should I step back and let them handle it from there. Yeah, we don't know. At this point, I just don't know. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you hope to come back next year and avail us of all the new news?
Come back next year and have the new news. Well, I'll probably be coming back no matter what. And I'll and I hope I'll have some sort of new news. I'll also be talking about my other project, which is 19th century classified. And anyone come to my talk last night?
Yes.
Yeah, was it good?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. So I'll probably have more on that. I'll also be speaking on that. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yeah? No, you're just stretching. Okay. All right, okay. You're bidding. I'll bid 200. Okay. All right. I think that's it then. Again, thank you.